introducing that.
I'm not sure I'm in the mindset.
Hello everyone and welcome back to The Game of Growth. My name is Miles Cassidy-Rice.
And I'm John Cassidy-Rice, and we have the pleasure to be your host for this week.
And today we are going to be covering the topic of self-talk.
Yeah, I talk to myself a lot, you know.
I know. But before we get there, we'll be going over our wins of the week first. So, John, what is your win of the week?
So this week was Freddie's, my grandson's 9th birthday. We went to a Nerf party. Have you heard of such a thing?
No.
That would have been great for when you were younger. Absolutely lovely. So there was a huge hall with all sorts of camouflage things all set up, and they ran 18 9-year-olds ran around shooting each other. It was so much fun.
How many times did you get shot?
Only once.
That's good.
How about you?
My win of the week was I got to go on a date with my wife Brittany on Saturday. So it's nice to spend some time with her without the kids and enjoy our time together. So.
Excellent.
And eat good food.
So this week we're exploring self-talk. How do you talk to yourself inside here? So I was reading a book called Words, and it talked about some research in there that was suggesting that how you talk to yourself makes a real difference. So I don't know if you come across this idea of, do you talk to yourself inside your own head?
Yep, I definitely talk to myself inside my own head. Yeah. And I think what's important to reinforce before you get too far into the topic again is when we talk about positive psychology, there's often this misconception that our self-talk has to always be positive, and it's this unnatural positivity that happens. So really what we're trying to say when we come from this positive psychology perspective is that we want to encourage more of those positive thoughts, but in a realistic manner. So
know that I'm great, I'm awesome.
Well, do you find that realistic?
Not really.
So we're not trying to trick ourselves into thinking these things, but rather there's a foundation to them in realism.
Yeah, so I think sometimes you listen to positive talk in self-help books and stuff, which have a lot of great information in there, but sometimes go to extremes on a point.
Yeah.
So that kind of like having to be positive all the time can be exhausting.
And not to mention, may not be very effective. I've worked with a lot of people that we come across this topic and we start to talk about how we can change our thoughts, and they say to me, well, I've tried it, it's not very effective. And I say, well, can you talk me through that? And maybe they've missed a penalty in football or something, and they've said to themselves, I'm fantastic, I'm still the best on the pitch. That kind of talk to themselves, or they think, okay, that's positive self-talk, but they don't believe it because they've just missed the penalty. So is that really realistic to that situation? So we have to find that balance.
Yeah. And in that situation, there's an opportunity to learn.
Yeah. Because
from every failure, there's some learning that happens from that. There's learning that happens from success as well. And I think sometimes that's skirted over. Yeah. So in the book I mentioned called Words, he was talking about some research that suggested that self-talk, when you sort of makes it personal, sort of, I'm good at doing this, I'm great at doing this, and you're not particularly, but you're still looking for some motivation, is that you change it to, you can do this, you have the ability to succeed. And that does a couple of things. One, it's more realistic, and you can grow and become better. So that's much more realistic. But also, by saying you can disassociate yourself from that I point of view. I thought that was an interesting thought. I don't know about what you think about that.
Yeah, I could see that being beneficial in terms of situations where, like you're mentioning, you might not necessarily want to go through those I statements. There's certainly times when I statements and affirmations can be beneficial.
Oh, yes.
But maybe shifting up the way that you're approaching it could help in terms of that believability and trying to reinforce yourself.
Yes. I think what's important from taken away from what you just said there is that this idea that kind of everything works, but doesn't work all the time. It's finding it in the right context and what works for you individually.
Yep. That goes right back to your point about learning from mistakes. Did that self-talk work? How might we change it to be more effective in the future? So we need to practice these things. We need to reinforce these things. And if they're not working, then maybe we shift our approach to them. So it might be shifting the way that you approach that, the way that you use that self-talk in specific scenarios.
Yes. So if you're in a negative frame of mind, some of that is useful and healthy, but it's not good to stay there.
Yeah.
So what sort of, any ideas of how you would get yourself out of that negative frame of mind, but being realistic at the same time?
Yeah, so my mentor, when I was going through my certification process for the Association for Applied Sports Psychology, was really great about this, because when you're working as a sports psychologist, it's really important that you're in the right frame of mind when you enter a session, because you don't want to be coming in that negative state of mind. So what he actually encouraged me to do was set aside some time where I could basically ruminate or just feel bad for myself for like an hour at certain times, that you can get that all out in one go.
Right.
And you can just allow yourself to be in that for a minute, because sometimes we just need that, and that's okay. But then it's important to have those actions to then move past that point, right?
Yeah.
So
I think that's healthy, because when we talk about positive psychology, the word positive is in the title. And like we said right at the beginning of this podcast, we're going, I feel like I need to be positive all the time to be able to succeed at anything.
Yeah, this is a positive psychology podcast. We have to be positive throughout it. Yeah. So I like to go through building blocks. I think it's very unrealistic, and in my experiences, very unrealistic to go from that negative state of mind straight to a positive state of mind. But ultimately, the end goal is we want to be optimistic. We want to get back to that positive state of mind. So I often put building blocks in between there, and go to a neutral space first. Now, what I mean by a neutral space is I'm not necessarily being negative about the situation. I'm not necessarily being positive about the situation, but I'm just accepting that I'm in that situation. And then from there, I can start to ground myself in that experience and then move towards the positive frame of mind.
So that's like taking a natural progression.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we kind of, we've had enough of this negative thought, but we have no feelings either way about it because we've worked it through, but we kind of like,
Yeah.
but actually, that's part of the movement forward. And then the next stage is go, so what can I do about it? Maybe asking yourself some questions and then start to explore and feeling different about it. So I always find that when we're dealing with emotions and states of being, it's better to go with what we'd naturally do if we can think through it. So example I'll often use is, how do you go from procrastination to action? Well, there's a natural progression there. And if we can follow that naturally and actually recognize the steps, if you like, that can work really well. So procrastination, if you do procrastinate, just put that off for a while. It's an old joke, but it's still worth saying. But let's say you're in procrastination, and there's different types of procrastination. There's the one that where you're just putting off energy, but there's also then gets moved to frustration, which can show up in a couple of different ways. One is that you go, right, I can't do this until I've tidied up the sock drawer. And you go and tidy up the sock drawer, and then you find the next thing to do. And that's kind of displacing the energy. But that frustration you feel of like, why am I not doing this? I know it's good for me. I know I need to do it. That frustration is good. That's where your body's starting to get a little bit more energy into your system. And then if you're lucky, you go into the next stage, which is anger. Now, I think a lot of people are afraid of anger, but I think it can be very healthy for us. If you get stuck there, it can be very toxic. But anger is, so what? I've got to do something. And that's your body revving yourself up to actually take action. And then it's, if you don't get stuck there or go back to procrastination, because you can loop back in any of these things, that if you get enough energy in it, you go, right, I'm going to do something. And then you channel that into sort of more motivational. So it doesn't mean you've got to do anything, but you feel more motivated. You feel like you've got the energy to do something. And then you're more likely to be able to take action. And if you think about it, that's a natural flow. So from negative thinking to positive thinking, there's a natural progression. And I think that part of that is that kind of like, I've had enough of this. And then what can I do about it?
Yeah, so to go on from that progression, when we're looking to go into the neutral space, because like you said, we don't want to stay in the negative space because that could be toxic and we could get looped in there.
Yes.
It's very easy as humans to stay in a negative space. So to get to that neutral space, that's where you want to start to identify some grounding techniques of being present in that moment. So it could be some self-talk, just to say, I'm here, or if you're in a performance environment, next ball or next pass, just a simple, maybe a little bit instructional, just grounding statement to bring you into that moment. And then from there, we can progress forward towards more of that positive thinking and utilize that motivation to become more optimistic.
Yes. And does the words that you use matter?
They do matter. They're very important. And something that I always reinforce with individuals that I work with is it should relate to you and your performance environment.
Right.
So it does take a little bit of a process to, again, discover what you need in those moments. You may try some statements and they don't work. That's okay. Think about them again. Think about what you need in those moments and adjust. But the words that you say to yourselves are going to have a big influence on whether they're effective or not. And unfortunately, it's not a case of you just set some words and you're good to go.
No.
We do need to practice it. And sometimes it's just a case of repetition and building that into your routine of when you're experiencing these situations, you develop the meaning behind those words. So sometimes it comes with that repetition as well.
Yeah, so I think sometimes it's so easy for us to do something wrong and say, well, I can't do this, which is a statement. And it sounds like a factual thing. So how would we use language to sort of free up our minds? And I think one of the ways to do that is to turn the situation into a question. How can I improve on this? It then opens up possibilities.
Yeah.
So that self-talk is, by utilizing questions, can make such a difference. I often wonder, when you ask yourself questions, who's listening?
Yourself.
Yeah. So that can't do something can be a real stopper. It's when you say, I choose not to do it, or will I do it, changes the whole aspect of how your mind processes. Because I think as human beings, we are pre-programmed to answer questions. Are we not?
Yeah, we're problem solving, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. And a question is a problem to solve. So the questions that you ask yourselves are your opportunity to get that process going.
Yes. And I love what Gregory Bateson says about questions. He once said, we are arrogant in our answers when we should be much more brave with our questions. So any questions that you've come across that have really helped in the situation?
So I guess whenever you're in any kind of environment where you may not feel very comfortable or you're unfamiliar or it's just challenging and you haven't been through that before, I would typically lean on more towards what can I learn from this situation?
Yeah.
So just because it may not necessarily be a great situation to be in doesn't mean that we don't have the opportunity to learn and to develop or to think about and reflect on what skills we could develop to be successful in those situations.
Yes. And I think that's where a great coach steps into play, because one of the fundamental tools of any coach, regardless of whether it's sports or business, is to ask questions. And once you've been coached for a while, one of the great benefits from being coached is that you start to, rather than have a statement that sounds like a fact, you start to ask yourself questions. And that can really open up that possibilities. So really, self-talk is a story that we'll weave into ourselves in our own minds. And what we can do to disrupt that is to ask questions and ask different types of questions. And the essential one, and it's not the one because every situation is different, is what can I learn from this?
Yeah. And it really reinforces the messages that we're delivering to ourselves. So if we're always telling ourselves that I can't do this, then that's what you start to believe.
Yes.
And you believe that you can't do it in those situations. Whereas if you swap that self-talk, you can try the neutral statements, go into positive, or you can try the questioning. What can I learn from this? You start to change the framing of your mind of your responses to those situations. And instead of just giving up, maybe you're more inclined to find ways to overcome those challenges.
Yes. And just a little tip, though, I know we talk about self-talk, but sometimes when you put yourself on a healthy diet, or you're going to sort of stay in and study, and somebody says, "Why didn't you come out with pizza for us?" And that's two things. If you say, "I can't do that," it now sounds like a chore, doesn't it? It sounds like you're missing out. But if you say, "I don't do that on a Tuesday night because I'm studying," that makes a difference. It turns it back into a choice. So that really does highlight the language that we use, not only to other people, but to ourselves, can really have an impact.
It can, you're right.
And another little study I come across, I've been reading a lot this week. Another little study I've been coming across is that it was with children, so this may help you.
I'm not a child.
No, with your children. So when you ask a child to say, "Oh, can you help me tidy up the toys?" Suddenly all this energy that children have seems to disappear and they go into meltdown over. You think, well, if you just help tidy up instead of doing this meltdown and all this resistance to it. So there's a little linguistic technique I come across, which would be interesting to see in practice, was that rather than sort of say, "Can you help?" you say, "Can you be a helper?" which puts it into a process. And they're more likely to engage with the process. So language has an impact.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where to go after that story.
I'm not much of a child psychologist. So.
Well, adults are just bigger, often a little bit hairier than children, but they still have the same aspects.
They're developing.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. Are you saying we as adults do not develop?
Well, there's a lot more development that occurs in that short period of time.
Yeah. Wow, fabulous. Well, we covered a lot again in this session. So we started off talking about this idea of self-talk and the impact that it can have. And that it's not about being positive all the time. And I think we really drove that home in this session. It's about being realistic.
Yeah, we want to ground everything in realism. It's not a case of being positive just for the sake of being positive, but actually there's a process to get to that positive mindset.
And one of the things that we explored was also going from negativity or procrastination. There's we do this naturally as human beings. There's steps that we can do to get ourselves out of it. And what we can do is kind of speed that process up by recognizing those different steps, but also asking questions to free up the mind.
Yeah, and the way that we frame those thoughts and the way that we frame the words to us is hugely important because it influences our decision making, it influences how we view situations, and ultimately we want to grow in those moments rather than experience just giving up.
And one of the things that we notice is about help and helper. So you could either subscribe or be a subscriber. I wonder if that will help you subscribe to the channel. Do you see what I did there?
And as always, we would love to hear your wins of the week in the comment section. So please share those with us. We want to celebrate your victories.
And until next time, have a wonderful week. Well, a couple of weeks, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, and a quick reminder before we do see you soon, if you're interested in having some coaching by either myself or John, please do visit milescassidy-rice.com, find the podcast page and submit using our form on that page.
Excellent. Well, have a wonderful couple of weeks and we'll see you soon.
See you later.